Ryan Stanton here with ACEP Frontline, joined today by Dr. Alexander Limkakeng. And he is not only from Duke, but also here, the research forum at ACEP 18. And we wanted to talk about, he's got some cool and interesting discussion points when it comes to the trends and the changes and everything that is going on with the world of research. And back in the day, we could do an old grumpy get off my yard type conversation. There seemed to be limitations to larger facilities and grants and the structure, but times are changing, and with technology comes ways that we can better get data, review data, larger data sets, and all those sorts of things. So we wanted to hit on a lot of those type things here with Alexander. So thank you, and tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into all this.
Well, thanks, Ryan. Research Forum has been and is a really exciting portion of the ACEP Scientific Assembly. It's been going on for decades now, and it really, I believe, is the most cutting edge stuff that occurs in emergency medicine, and I'm in awe of my colleagues in terms of pushing the frontiers and pushing the boundaries of what emergency medicine even is, coming up with new ideas before it even hits the presses or the literature. So it's a really exciting place to be, because it's a place where ideas are being discussed that haven't been discussed before, and a lot of it really touches our practice. And it can easily be seen how it's going to be a part of our practice in the future. So it's not academic. I talk about the two meanings of academics. So academics are people like me who work at places like Duke. We do research and we train physicians. But sometimes in common parlance we say academic, meaning it's not really meaningful or it's not really useful. We're looking at academic in the first meaning, stuff that is rigorous and scientific, but it's not just out there pie in the sky stuff. It's stuff that we're actually going to use.
And now, you being from Duke, someplace that's got a storied history of research and advancements, but even now moving into the community settings and smaller settings, and that ability to get data and process the data. What are some of the big trends that you're seeing in the evolution of research?
Well, one of the trends, so we reviewed a lot of abstracts. So we actually reviewed, I think, a record number of abstract submissions, like 900 abstracts, which is, just an incredible number. And so we had tons of reviewers help with that. And we ended up accepting about 400 and some. And so we looked through a lot of the titles, and one of the common new things, sort of hot topics that's coming up that maybe we even need like a new category for, is going to be machine learning and EHR-driven algorithms. And so basically, if you think about the traditional way we do research, you might have a large database that's already existing, and you do a kind of statistical model called a logistic regression, and you might include if you have a really big database, like 10 or 15 variables. Well, because of these advances in data science and these people who are able to, really do this kind of computer work, they're able to take all kinds of numbers of variables and really analyze them in full depth to come up with a way to predict what's going to happen to that patient. And so people are doing that with very basic stuff at triage even, and just mining all the stuff that exists in every one of our EMRs to create an algorithm that might predict sepsis, might predict a bad outcome from sepsis, predict admission from triage. And those are the kinds of papers that we're beginning to see now being presented.
And that's amazing, is the ability, because we're getting more and more of these sources. Like I was talking to a little bit earlier, Dr. McGowan, about military, and the military has their databases. And with CEDAR, with emergency medicine, we're starting to get data there. And then you have the national sources, you've got the EMR-based sources. So, what used to be this hand processing of information is now these larger repositories. How exciting is it to you, as somebody who is active in research, to have these capabilities and this growth of the access to data points and information, so we're not having to, have somebody manually go through paper charts? You've got this ability to do exponential growth in your data points.
Well, It's analogous to research forum itself. It used to be that we were sort of like off in our own little silo, and now it's becoming much more incorporated into the overall assembly, right? Which is an exciting thing because we get so much more input and interaction with the community clinicians who aren't working at academic centers, and I think it's driving really important research questions, right? And so likewise, instead of having this whole separate research operation that collects data, we should be using the stuff that we're already collecting for clinical data to drive research, right? And there's there's two special topics that are going to be presented at Research Forum that kind of touch on this. So one is my good friend Judd Hollander is going to be talking about telemedicine, okay? And one of the things he has mentioned in one of his prior versions of that is that we only begin to use clinically a fraction of the data that's available about one of our patients when we make decisions, right? And, companies, they know, like CVS knows far more about the ED patient you see on Tuesday than we could ever possibly know. And how is it that they are able to use that information to their benefit, but we're not using it to help them get healthy, right? So he's going to talk a little bit about that, but more so about new models of care and sort of delivering health services. And then another example of how we can just leverage what we're already doing in clinical care is going to be the pedal network. So, as disclosure, I'm a part of this group. It's a large number of academic centers that are funded by NIH. And one of the things they're trying to do is, again, just utilize, instead of having this separate data collection system, let's use the EMR and let's use usual care and sort of create your scientific study embedded into usual care. And there's tons of things under usual care, as you know, where we still don't really have really great information about what's the best thing to do, right? Like, you may practice a certain way, I may practice a different way, you think you're right, I may think I'm right. We need to study, right? And it's all within usual care. It's all being done right now. If we could just find a way to separate those two groups that happen in usual care, you can get enough patients and just capture it passively under the EMR, you can do a really powerful study, a really big study, without spending millions and millions and millions of dollars like you would, in a traditional trial.
I mean, we've got all of these opportunities for research and information that are just right there at our fingertips, and now technology is coming around enough that you can utilize that data. And even on a project you don't even know yet, we are already collecting data.
Yeah.
And then we can come back and say, oh, I want to look for this. And all of that information and data is already there and being able to pull it together. And I know a lot of the EMRs with the number of systems that interact with each other, as in the diversity that you have there, but also these data repositories that are out there that have all this collection of just raw data.
Yeah.
And you go and pick whatever little piece of fruit that you're looking for in that particular case, it's a complete shift, allowing for this, exponential explosion in research capabilities versus what in the past was having to be a very well-defined plan with singular or small, narrow focus.
Right.
And then once that was done, it was done.
It's like a small, clean database versus a huge, dirty database, right?
Right.
And, with a huge, dirty database, you can pick out that clean group, right? If you've got it, right? But the trick is collecting that first. One of the other exciting things that we're seeing is that a lot of data scientists, there are a lot of people who specialize in this, and so emergency physicians are really understanding how to do these kinds of analyses themselves a bit more, but also working with real experts in sort of mining this data. And so I think it's essential that we have collaborations with people who work clinically, right, with these PhD scientists who have the expertise, maybe some of the specialized expertise in doing the data mining or doing the data analysis. Because, they're really smart people, but they don't have the expertise and knowledge about what clinical care is and how it progresses and how a patient flows through the emergency department. Even though it seems obvious to some folks, there's a lot of nuance, right? And so it's exciting to see these collaborations forming where emergency physicians are, collaborating with these data scientists.
Another talk that you guys have put together, and we actually already talked to Seth Truger here, another discussion is the role of social media and online platforms
Absolutely.
for not only research. I mean, we've seen that Twitter is actually pretty good at epidemiology based on the activities online. They can pinpoint where things are happening based on the activities and discussions of them. Where are you seeing that role and potential for something that is more than just this, more than just arguments over politics, a source for actual data and information?
Well, I participate a little bit in Med Twitter, and there's still plenty of EM-related politics or EM debates, and those are fun to participate in. I think, so at the basic level, we're scratching the surface of increasing these just collaborations, right? And social media allows that to occur. And that's phenomenal, and that's a tool that wasn't available to us previously, because previously conferences like these were the only ways you might be able to get to know somebody across the country or meet them even. But now it's so easy. You can just tag someone, or you may stumble upon somebody and you have a common interest, and then it takes off from there. And the rapidity of feedback. So the traditional method is you publish, you collect your data, you write your paper, you publish it. That takes years sometimes, and then you get your feedback. But now you can just put an idea out there and just get immediate feedback from somebody who might be an expert in the topic.
Interestingly, the whole discussion of social media was that we're putting stuff out there that's not ready for prime time, and you don't have that peer review.
Right.
But what I've found is social media is the ultimate peer review, because now instead of 10 people reviewing it, you have 10,000 people.
Yeah.
And that's the key. I mean, the strength and a weakness is the strength is you have so many people reviewing what's going on and kind of picking it apart and asking the tough questions, but you also have, the weakness being if somebody takes everything for face value and doesn't look at it critically like we need to with anything that may not be fully vetted yet.
Well, I think social media has revealed what has always been true, which is that you should critically think about any piece of information that's given to you, right? And social media has really just revealed that to be even more important, right? It's always been important, but now I think it's a little more obvious how important that is. The one other thing I just wanted to touch on is this idea of breaking down barriers between academics and clinicians, and the value of that is that when we produce a study now, it's actually being studied in the sort of settings that we care about and in the patients we care about. So it's not this select subgroup of patients who are chosen out for a clinical trial, but it's the patients that we're seeing every day, and likewise. The democratization of peer review is also that. So we're producing papers that are going to be consumed by the people who are actually practicing clinically. And so it's no longer just papers, oriented or aimed at a select few reviewers, but it's papers that are, aimed at the masses, which is what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be producing knowledge that people care about, right?
Interestingly, I was going to bring that up, the whole generalizability, the reproducibility, the accuracy of data, because now, we're capturing data in points in the patients that are being seen and not necessarily just in, isolated academic settings, because a lot of the old research was going to come from larger academic centers, which was not necessarily reproducible. Can that generalize to the community, to the rural setting, to wherever it is? And with this ability to start data mining these larger repositories, not only do you get the accuracy of volume, taking out a lot of that, to get clinical significance, which is always the challenge.
Right.
When you're looking at something that may happen at a facility, 10 or 20 times a year, the ability to get to statistical significance is so challenging unless it's just a very blatant thing that you're looking for. But now, as opposed to having that one facility where you're getting people to collect 10 cases, you have 100 hospitals, and now you've got 1,000 cases.
Right.
And you can reach that statistical significance and weed out a lot of the variability and a lot of that creep and things like that. And so it allows for the ability at a more efficient and cheaper cost to get more accurate and voluminous data.
Oh, so you touched on something that just reminded me of something else that's happening. You notice there's no single hospital system anymore, right? We all work in these collaborative health systems that include 3, 4, 20 hospitals. And those health systems are unified by a common EMR a lot of times so health systems are growing and trying to accumulate sort of multiple entities, multiple hospitals under one roof, one umbrella. So that's just creating even more opportunities for exactly what you're talking about, is trying to collect more data and more representative data, even from a quote one site study. So Kaiser Permanente is a well-known kind of one of the first examples of this, but now we're all almost working in some kind of system like that, where it's multiple hospitals. It includes a traditional academic sort of mecca place, right, and a couple like outlying community places that just are just seeing bread and butter emergency patients. So it's a really exciting time. It's a convergence of that's got to do with politics and money, but these forces are driving together large health systems with huge amounts of data, who are interested in finding the best ways to care for patients across a diverse amount of settings. And guess what? That's what we're interested in too, right?
In what I see as the future, and I don't know how much this rolls into research, but not only these collections, the data itself, but using the technology to real-time assess data, and thus augment our judgment and augment our training and education by being able to take the characteristics of that patient and actually make real-time predictions and start to put in here and help guide us, be an extra set of analysis as we look at our patients, having the computer also taking these things and statistically saying, well, based on these data points, this is the risk to this patient. These are the things that we need to be concerned about. These are the things you need to look for, and this is what you can expect.
Yeah, one of the exciting things is that you're absolutely right. The people who are doing this kind of work are not producing this, new machine learning score that's meant to just kind of throw out what are the variables that are important, and then it's another decision rule for us to memorize and try to use. But they're actually talking about, we're deriving it, and now we're going to implement it. And of course, there's a lot of work to be done around, how are we going to implement it, and how do we validate and make sure that the rule really works. One of my colleagues at Duke actually is doing some of this work. His name's Dan Buckland, and one of the exciting things he pointed out was, these rules can not only parse out tons and tons of rich data sets to come up with a prediction, but they can also feed back to the clinician what are the missing data points that the model needs in order to improve its prediction. So it can also provide real-time feedback about, hey, here's a prediction, here's how accurate this prediction's likely to be, and here's what I would need to make the prediction even better. And so there's real power there to not only just make a one-time call, but also over iterations, make a better and better call, make a better and better decision, and it's augmenting human decisions, right? It's not replacing human decisions.
Well, that's it, is augmenting what we can do and getting to the point in technology. We're kind of at that point in EMRs, or we have been, to where they're still a big challenge, and they're just more of a pain in the ass, as opposed to where they will go eventually, which is actually being a functional and interactive tool.
Right.
It's not just a receiver of data, but also gives back information and deduction and analysis.
Yeah.
And helps guide. I mean, I know when we were talking about, the potential of, these supercomputers coming in and, unfortunately, to quote South Park, taking our jobs, and replacing us, and then finding out that, the deduction and the critical thinking of the physician mind is superior in many ways, but then now bringing the two together and say, what can I do as a physician with the training and the critical thinking and the context that I can add, but also the sheer volume of calculations and data and data responsiveness of a computer-based system, and what can we do together in order to advance care? And I think that's going to be our future. I think the future is going to be, the human element and the IT element coming together to be the treating team for the patient.
Yeah, well, I mean, we forget, again, we work clinically, right? The human element can't be replaced. We have to doctor our patients. That's always going to be true. The machine will never be able to do that to the way that we do. Studies have actually shown that, patients actually release endorphins when a physician sits by the bedside and talks to them. So there's something to the human element, right? That's always going to be there. I liken some of the advances in technology to a little bit like a camera, right? In the old days, it took a lot of skill to use a camera to capture a really good image. And now I can take a picture that's almost as good as one of those old-time, highly skilled, practiced photographers with the camera that's on my phone. But if you give me an iPhone and you give a professional photographer an iPhone, they're still going to do better than I am, right? So there's still going to be a role for expertise, right? And in our clinical expertise, our ability to understand patients and how to communicate medical information to them, that's always going to be needed, required, right? But now we've got just a better tool to give us better information and, take out some of the variability and some of the technical elements of making a decision. But we'll still be the ones, explaining the decision, enacting and executing the decision.
Well, and what you talk about there, with your camera reference as the professional photographer, they take in the context, the stuff around it,
right.
Those things to consider, like the lighting, the angles, all of the framing.
Yeah.
And that's what the phone, if we're talking about that in terms of our camera method, can't do. And so that's the difference. And,
or even choosing which picture to take, right?
Yeah. And so for us building on each other and, that symbiotic relationship where we working together, you get a greater positive outcome and better results than we could individually on our own. Because there's clearly stuff that these EMRs and computers and things could do that we cannot do. I mean, just the sheer amount of calculations and variabilities and things to take in the pictures and trends and, stuff that I have to manually go down now and say, well, what was the patient's, GFR and kidney function, historically, and start looking back.
Yeah.
Or even something like the computer itself saying this patient has had a history of recurrent this type of urinary tract infection with these cultures, with this type of resistance pattern. Here's your ideal antibiotic or whatever treatment approach is going to be based on this and their kidney function and their age and their other medications and variables, pulling all of that into something that we physically cannot do.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I'm excited about the future. I'm excited by, some of the things that this is going to enable us to spend more time thinking about when we work clinically and, pay attention to more. It just takes some of the, these kind of rote things out of the picture for us, right? And that's kind of the idea.
Talking here with Dr. Alexander Limkakeng from Duke, but also for our discussion today, the guru of research and information. Kind of an interesting conversation, getting into not only research but also the crystal ball of looking into what we can look forward to, and that can also turn us all into researchers and folks that can advance medicine. How can folks get in touch with you if they have more information, questions, or thoughts?
Email, of course, is always available, alexander.limkakeng@duke.edu. I'm on Twitter under @Limkakeng. The research forum is running as we speak, and it's interdigitated in the scientific assembly, so you may just see me around when you go to your educational courses, and that's another positive movement that we've had over the last couple of years of just really integrating into ACEP. And we're having this very happy marriage of the academic emergency physician and the community or non-academic emergency physician, because we all want the same thing. We want to take care of patients better, and academics have a way of trying to figure out how to do that and approach that, but the community physicians have got a need that we've got to listen to and address, right? And if we don't talk to them, how do we know what that is, right? How do we provide them what they need?
Well, you're an outright. You got 22,000 likes on there. You got quite a following here on the on the Twitter.
It's a matter of volume. I waste way too much time on Twitter. I think you could ask my wife about that. But I am happy to say that all that wasted time has been converted into a line on my CV because I was asked to be part of the social media committee for ACEP because basically I was the guy among the two co-chairs who tweeted more. So that was my credential.
The social media team, and I've done that for the last few years. I mean, of course, that's kind of the natural sphere for me, but having you involved as well. And I appreciate it. Fantastic conversation. As for me, you can contact me, youreverydaymedicine@gmail.com. That's youreverydaymedicine@gmail.com. I'm at everydaymed on Twitter. Make sure that you've got us on your automatic downloads for the podcast on your device. So you're listening to every episode, 52, at least 52 a year. And want to make sure you can keep up to date with cool conversations like the one we just had with Dr. Limkakeng. As for me, I'm Dr. Ryan Stanton, and you've been tuning in to ACEP Frontline.
Thank you.